Welcome back. It's time now for Data Point to focus on what has happened over the last 1 year, which ends on 30th of June 2025 at the conclusion of the financial year 2024-2025. You recall that last year, at a time like now, we were talking about a total budget of 3.99 trillion shillings. And of course, the finance bill of 2024 was defeated or withdrawn. And the president, upon that happening, instructed that there was going to be a reduction in the budget of the country, and therefore the national government reduction was put at 145.7 billion shillings. We'll be looking at what has happened over the period of 12 months. Again, the counties, the share of revenue was reduced by 13 billion shillings from 400 billion shillings to about 387 billion shillings. Something else that happened is that at the time, some of the budget cuts that were major, the national executive, of course, was 139.81 billion shillings. For parliament, it was 3.7 billion shillings, and the judiciary lost 2.1 billion shillings. Again, we'll be looking at what has happened over time. The other key cuts were State House and the Office of the Deputy President. The cuts were 6 billion shillings combined, and the roads and transport sector was losing 17.3 billion shillings. The Ministry of Health was losing 6.9 billion shillings. So how has it looked over time? Let's start with the vote at State House. So the budget that was presented by the former Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury, Professor Undone, was 9.5 billion shillings for State House. But you recall that there was an announcement that most of the allocations will be reduced, including development budget and the confidential vote for State House. So the cut was down to 4.3 billion shillings. So this would have been the budget of the State House for the financial year 2024-2025. But this has been changing over time. So this was Supplementary Budget 1. In Supplementary Budget 2, passed in February 2025 by the National Assembly, the allocation for State House rose from 4.3 billion shillings to 8.3 billion shillings. Now there's a new supplementary budget that has just come in from the National Treasury, and it's raising the allocation for State House to 12 billion shillings. So compare that figure of 12 billion shillings versus the original one of 9.5 billion shillings, and you see the promise of cutting by more than half has actually been undone to an increment of more than 7 billion shillings. For the Office of the President, initially it was 5.43 billion shillings an allocation. It was reduced in Supplementary Budget 1 to 3.58 billion shillings in accordance with the wishes of majority of Kenyans. Then this was revised again upwards in Supplementary Budget 2 to 4.54 billion shillings, and now has been revised again upwards to reach 4.6 billion shillings. At the Office of the Deputy President, initially 4.9 billion shillings. This time it was Rigathi Gachagua who was the Deputy President. It was reduced down to 2.6 billion shillings. That's almost 50% cut. But in Supplementary Budget 2, it was raised to 3.02 billion shillings, and now it is being raised to 3.1 billion shillings. For the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, it has moved from originally 1.14 billion shillings down to 720 million shillings, up to 955 million shillings in Supplementary Budget 2, and now Supplementary Budget 3, 958 million shillings, which is also an increment. Let's take a look at other votes of what has transpired. For the Teacher Service Commission, the initial allocation was 358 billion shillings. Upon the loss of Finance Bill 2024, it was reduced to 347.9 billion shillings, but now has been raised consistently now to stand at 369.6 billion shillings, which is the supplementary budget before the National Assembly as we speak. The National Police Service initially was an allocation of 110.6 billion shillings, reduced to about 108.7 billion shillings, but now it is up again to 116.3 billion shillings, which is more than even the original allocation. For Defense, Minister of Defense, from 173.1 billion shillings, a slight reduction then in July 2024, February 2025, an increment, and now it's static at 179.7 billion shillings. So let's take a look at what that has meant. State House has grown. The increment has grown by 7.7 billion shillings. The promise was to cut it. Office of the President, the increment has been more than 1 billion shillings. The Office of the Deputy President, more than 500 million shillings. The Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, a growth by more than 238 million shillings if you have to compare that against the initial decline or reduction. The National Police Service has eventually gained 5.7 billion shillings if you had to compare the ultimate figure versus the original figure. The Minister of Defense has gained 6.6 billion shillings. Let's take a look at what has happened to the development budget. So originally, in the financial, or rather the budget of 2024-2025 in June last year, the development vote was 746.3 billion shillings. Eventually, after several cuts at every supplementary budget, it is closing the year at 597.5 billion shillings, which is a reduction of more than 147 billion shillings. Now, again, recurrent expenditure was originally at 1.63 trillion shillings. This is what was supposed to be reduced because there was a gap, because the Finance Bill 2024 was dropped. Eventually, it has grown to 1.77 trillion shillings, which is quite significant growth of a couple of billions. Let's take a look at what else has caused the increment in recurrent expenditure. So, Raila Odinga was seeking to be the chairperson of the AUC Commission, and to do that, the National Treasury had approved an amount of 523.8 million shillings. Remember, it was not originally in the budget, so this was through what you call Article 223 of the Constitution that allows the government to spend resources on what may not have been foreseen. So eventually there was approved withdrawals by the Control of Budget of 316.3 million shillings, but it is safe to say that at least this campaign cost the country at least $500 million shillings to seek that seat, which we didn't succeed as a country. Now, the other thing that we need to focus on is the hate emission, which also may have had some gaps. There may not have been sufficient financing, but the Treasury approved an allocation of 2.4 billion shillings, but what had been approved by the Control of Budget as of March 2025 was 1.1 billion shillings. So again, it is safe to say that this hate emission has cost the country at least 2.4 billion shillings. So that's what it looks like when you're talking about the shifts in the management of the country's financial year 2024-2025 budget. And obviously, you can see that the country has not lived to the austerity measures, and you call them austerity mirage. That's data point for this week. Now, to another story. A woman and her 20-year-old daughter were sexually assaulted at their home in Muka constituency, Makueni County, when armed robbers broke into their home. The gang also drove away goats, as Francis Mtalaki now reports.
Detectives in Muka constituency, Makueni County, have launched investigations into a horrific incident where a woman and her 20-year-old daughter were gang raped during a violent attack on Tuesday night. According to the victim, 4 armed men stormed their home at around 11 p.m., tied her up, then took turns assaulting her and their daughter before fleeing with 46 goats.
Wakaanza kuongeleshana na mzee akimwambia jambo ni moja, ukitaka kifo si tutakuwa ama unataka uwai.
Following the attack, neighbors helped to recover 40 goats, but the suspects managed to escape with 6. Police say they are pursuing crucial leads and are confident that arrests will be made soon.
Toka nje ndio walienda kwa watoto, wakaingia huko hata wao wakawafunga. Saa ile niliuliza mtoto, akaniambia amejanyisiwa na mmoja wao.
The incident has sparked outrage across the village, with residents accusing local security officers of laxity, allowing livestock theft and sexual violence to flourish unchecked. They are now urging the police to act decisively and restore security in the area.
Na tukiendelea hivi, ambaye tunashirikiana na wananchi, ambaye tumekutana hata saa hizi na wananchi wa hii area, tumekubaliana tushirikiane, tuwe tunapasha, tushare information, tuhakikishe hii maneno itakuwa imeisha kabisa.
During a security meeting held at Upeponi village, local security officials assured residents that enhanced patrols are underway and 98 goats and 14 cows have been recovered in the past week. Francis Mtalaki, Citizen TV.
And to make a correction there, it's Muka Ward in Kilome constituency in Makueni County. But with that, we're taking a short break here. When we come back, we have business and sports. Here is what's coming up in business.